what I've got to share today may, I hope and pray, will be of some value to you. If even one little thing strikes a chord with you, then great. I'm always open for questions and answers afterwards, or if you wanted to email me, I'll give you the email at the end of the day or at the end of this talk. And Roger and I met, and he said, well, what do you want to talk about? I said, well, what do you want me to talk about? You know, it was one of those deals, and we went back and forth, and he suggested, well, what about some leadership issues? And I said, well, okay. Over the years, I've kept this, I have a rather fat file of just different things that I've observed. I think that's probably, if I sat down, I'd say that's probably the way I learn the most. I take a lot of notes, and you know, observation seems to be one of the ways that I absorb things. And so whenever anything hits me, I throw it in that file, and then about once a year, I take the file out and keep this list. And so I said, well, how about this list of things that I kind of expected in leadership when I was coming up through Western Family, and then I'll compare that to what I've kind of discovered along the way and maybe the differences. And so we agreed that might be an interesting topic, and so I revisited my file, and it was about that time to revisit it, and went through it, and that's what I've got here today. So as Roger mentioned, I went to school in Pullman, grew up in Spokane, if everybody's familiar with Eastern Washington, but my whole adult life I've been down here. I started working for Gregg Foods. A guy by the name of Bob Gregg actually invented soft margarine, and golden soft margarine. I worked there for 3 years and was calling on Western Family as a salesman when I went to work for him. And I've been there ever since. It's been just really a great career path for me. I grew up in the food business. My dad and my granddad were in it. All my summer jobs were in it and that type of thing, and I just matriculated into it. And I'm in a different area than they were, but it's really been a great career for me. A little bit about Western Family. We're a kind of a super buyer for large grocery warehouses. You'll see our products, you probably know us by our products. Western Family Foods in this area the products are distributed through independent grocery stores. So it's easier to explain where we're not than where we are. We're not in Fred Meyer, we're not in Albertsons, we're not in QFC. We are in Thriftway, Weiser's, a lot of stores out on the coast where independents dominate, things like that. Erickson's over in Bend, places like that. The idea behind it is to take the independent grocers, little volume, and combine a bunch of independent grocers all around the country and buy for them on a massive scale so they can be competitive with Albertsons, Fred Meyer, Safeway, and people like that. So the food business is an interesting business right now. Walmart, of course, is a big competitor and chomping away, getting market share and things like that. And Winn-Dixie's in bankruptcy. You know, you got all sorts of things happening in our industry right now, including the pressure of energy costs and things like that, and in a really high volume but very low margin business. So we've got lots of things that we're trying to address now to stay, you know, in the game and be profitable, be competitive. But the primary goal of our company is keep the independent grocer competitive. We're the 7th, 8th, 9th, depending on what list, largest privately held company in Oregon. We'll do about $650 million in volume this year, another about $400 million in fresh meat sales that we don't actually book as revenue. We negotiate the pricing and all that, but we don't actually handle the billing. Our business has been good. It's been growing for the last 10 years, continues to grow. We only do about probably 10% of our business here in Oregon. The rest is done in about 28, 29 other states around the United States. So that's a little background on Western Family. I think that I thought, well, I'll start with what I heard about leadership, or what's kind of good about leadership, and then however, but it's better too. So I've got this little compare and contrast thing that I worked up. You know, leadership's an interesting topic. It strikes me that you really don't have any progress, good or bad, without leadership. So, you know, you could argue Churchill versus Hitler, maybe. Both were leaders, sure. But, you know, was one progressive, one maybe not, you know, that type of thing. But leadership's a key component in any progress that takes place. And you know, Webster has this big, you know, commanding authority, paramount responsibility. I looked it up a couple of days ago. I thought, you know, to me, leadership really is a person who sets the direction, sets the pace, sets an example, and then takes responsibility. So if you think about that, then there's leaders everywhere. There's leaders in your family, there's leaders in your community, there's leaders in your church, there's leaders in your company, there's leaders in all the nonprofit organizations around town. There's leadership needed and experienced and developed in every aspect of life. So you might say to yourself, well, you know, I'm not a leader. You know, I'm a manager. You know, I'm a clerical. You know, you don't have to be a CEO to be a leader. My wife does a great job of leading our household. I mean, I am, when she says to move, I move. And when she's running the place, and I understand that, she does a great job of doing that. We have informal leaders at Western Family that don't have big titles, and boy, I'll tell you, they really move a lot of the sway in our company. So leadership applies to everybody. I'll start with my list. I started with it's good, or this is something that maybe I learned in school, or I was drilled into me by my dad, or what have you. And then my experience has kind of changed my view of it. It's good to go, go, go and get there first. However, I think it's better to be patient for short periods of time because speed creates mistakes. I've learned that when I get in a hurry, when our company gets in a hurry, when my kids get in a hurry, mistakes happen. And speed is a detriment a lot of the time. Now, if you're in the high-tech world and that, where things are being recreated every 30 days, then speed you're in a different paradigm. Speed's important, but even then, going too fast in a 30-day window can be fatal. I explain it to our employees as it's like driving a race car. The faster you go, the more horrific the accidents. And the accidents are going to happen, So speed, being patient can be a virtue. It's good to know all that you can possibly know. However, it's better to have common sense and know what you don't know. And I've learned, well, I'll tell you, nobody likes being around a know-it-all. I mean, isn't that a true statement? I'll get in meetings and there isn't a whole lot I know about certain aspects of our company. But boy, after a while, you hear these people going, and you go, oh, they can't possibly know all that. So I think it's good to have common sense. The other thing is there's a little play here on humility, and that humility actually is fairly attractive. When you think of people that you want to follow in terms of leadership, humility is something that generally is attractive, as long as it's true humility. False humility is a different story. But it's good to be really good at something. That's one of those, my dad, it's good to be really good at something. I say, however, it's better to be competent at a lot of things. And I've learned this primarily working in a small company. Now, small company meaning we've got 80 employees. So it's not a huge, far-flung enterprise. My first 3 years at Great Foods, we were part of A.E. Staley, big corn processor in the Midwest, big company. And what I learned was big companies, there's a lot of politics. Small companies, there's a lot of personalities. So there's a trade-off. You got to be kind of wired in the big company and get on somebody's coattails and be a part of a team that's actually getting funded and being noticed. In a small company, there's nowhere to hide. In fact, people are probably saying, "Hey, where's Ron? Where's Ron today?" He went to the dentist. I mean, you can't go to the dentist and not be found out in our place. So, but in a small company, you get the opportunity to kind of wear a lot of hats. There's a lot of slop over. You get involved in accounting projects, you get involved in IT projects, you get involved in sales projects, and so you get this broader based experience. Now that has served me really well. Now I don't know if that's serviceable in a large organization where you have to actually make your way in one silo. But for me, it's been really good to know to be competent in a number of areas rather than be specialist in one area. It's good to manage win-win situations. There's books about that and everything else. My view is, however, it's better to learn how to manage lose-lose situations. And this is one of the surprises that came to me in the corner office migration. I had the opportunity to kind of be a chief operating officer for a year before I stepped into the retirement of the former CEO. And after 9 months, and many of you have probably experienced this too, I thought, I can do this guy's job. I've been trailing him around for 9 months. How hard can it be? I'm ready. Candy turned 65. I mean, I'm going. And the next thing you know, boom, January 1st comes, and January 2nd, I'm looking around, and it's only me. And one of the first things that came in was, hey, our second largest customer is about $2 million overdue, and should we eat the $10,000 on this order or hack off the customer? And I thought, hey, what's the glory here? I thought, what do you mean, eat 10,000 or hack off a customer? There's no win-win here. And I preached. I pretty soon figured out that the corner office gets all the lose-lose deals. The win-win happens way below you, you know. And everybody's slapping high fives on the win-wins, and then they're dragging in these big, gnarly problems to me and saying, well, now it's up to you to decide. So that was one of the things I learned in the corner office, was that you got to learn to deal with lose-lose situations if you're going to be a leader. And as much as win-win is always the goal, and there's no question that's always the goal, but not every situation turns out win-win. It's good to take charge, call the shots, be in control. You know, that was another one that my dad was always deal. And I say, however, it's better to embrace growth through less control. And it's a little cliche-ish, but you know, the more you do give away, the more that comes back to you. And that's not just in business, that's in relationships and life and with your kids and things like that too. But control restricts growth. It really does. And it's an insidious thing. It creeps into organizations and it creeps into even families and says, oh, well, I got to have my way. That's what control is about, is I got to have my way. And that restricts growth in organizations. It's good to build obedience to a corporate plan. You know, got a plan 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10 year, whatever. I say, however, it's better to build loyalty to a cause. You know, we get more out of our people when they tie into the cause of what we're doing, which is as simple as, hey, we feed people and let them save money because Western Family products are cheaper than national brands. If you can get your company or your family or your community to buy into a cause, then that unleashes a lot of passion. And passion's unlimited. You cannot compete with passion. When people are invested in a cause, and there's books about Southwest Airlines. They're probably the poster child. Starbucks, Microsoft. There's a lot of people that have been able to hook their employees into a cause. You'll unleash a power that the plan will never. People. How many people have operating plans? I've got one. I'm in the corner office. I'm supposed to be the architect of it, and I dust it about every 6 months, and we update it and all that. But people really invest themselves in the cause of what you're trying to do. So it's good to have leaders who are certain. Okay, certain. That's good. Yeah. I say it's better to have leaders who are clear about risk, because there is no certainty. That's another one of these corner office deals I found. I thought, oh yeah, plan A, B, C, all that deal. Well, what do you do when A, B, and C all fail? Well, that's the hard part, is you need to be clear about risk, because all tough decisions in leadership are about trade-offs and managing risk. And it's never as easy as you think it is, but there is no certainty. So people who are certain, beware of people who are certain, Harvey Mackay, I don't know if you've read any of his books, but he was a Mailwell guy for years, and he's written some humorous books about education and MBAs and all sorts of other things. But one of his books was titled, "Beware of the Naked Man Who Offers You His Shirt." And that's how I feel about certainty. When people come up to me and say, "This is a lock, we're going to have this program ready by November 1st," I just say, "Oh, wait a minute here." Maybe 99%, but then it's always the one that comes up. So it's good to provide as much direction as possible. This is probably a good one for me and my kids. This is how I think with my kids. I've got 2 daughters. One's a freshman in college, one's a sophomore over at Sunset. So, however, it's better to ask as many questions as possible. Now, this was a hard one for me to understand, because I thought, well, hey, I'm the dad. You do what I would like, kinda, because trust me here, they're both girls. You heard that, right? So I don't really understand them to begin with, and then I'm going to try and control them, right? And so me and my wife have a lot of conversations about, is this normal? Yeah, this is normal. Okay, I'll back off. I'm bringing the boy thing in. There you got 2 girls, and I'm going, oh man, hey Pam, is this normal? Yeah, Ron, this is pretty normal. Oh. So anyway, I found it's a lot easier to relate to them by asking them questions. And you know what? When you ask questions, it involves the other people. When you make statements, it involves you. And that works well at work as well, is when you ask questions rather than make statements, you are involving the other party. And you know, it's amazing how much you learn from the other party. I learn every day from my kids, you know, some pretty weird stuff I might add, but, and not overly useful for a dad, but it's quite educational, and they're engaged, and they no longer feel like I'm telling them, you know, when I'm asking them. So it's good to have people working for you. You know, I mean, that's always nice, you know, yeah, you know, direct reports and all that. I think it's better to be working for your direct reports. And this again, it's a little cliche. There's a lot of books out there about servant leadership and how you can actually unleash power in an organization. But it's true that, and I didn't realize this until I ended up in the corner office, was how much control over resources you have that you can free up to other people. And that's what they need to be successful. So you're holding all the tools that they really need to be successful. And once you get that, you feel like, hey, I should be giving these tools away rather than trying to use them myself. And I think it works great. Personally, it's, if you can flip, you know, there's books that show they flip the organizational chart upside down and all that, so this is nothing new, but it really does work, is when you can free up the tools that you have control of, which would be assets, money, people's priorities, time, the 6-month-old dusty plan, things like that that you have control of. If you can free those up and give them to other people, then you're going to liberate those people. It's good to be really smart. You know, that's another one of my dad's deals. You know, hey, you got to study, and you know, it's the way to the successful career and all that. And I'd say that's true, but it's better to have good character. And I think if I'm sure it's a theme of many of the speakers who are here, is that, you know, your reputation and your personal attributes will take you further in life. Maybe, you know, whether it's a company or a family or a community or a nonprofit or anything, your reputation and your personal attributes will carry you further than your intelligence. I firmly believe that. You know, when I was a kid, I got in a fist fight in grade school. I came home, you know, and I was on kind of the losing end of the fist fight. And I came home and I was mumbling and grumbling about it. And my dad said, well, did you learn anything? I said, yeah, you know, I'm not going to fight that guy anymore. You know, and he says, well, no, you got to learn that either you got to be the toughest kid in the school or you got to quit fighting. And, you know, pretty soon that started to sink in, you know. And I thought, you know, I think you're right. You know, I'm not probably the toughest kid in the school. I just learned that 3 hours before. And so that was the last fist fight I ever got in. And I thought, you know, it's the same way with intelligence. You better be the smartest guy in the room or, you know, punt the ball. And understand that what really matters is your reputation, how you handle yourself in certain situations. So that's my list of it's good to, but it's better than. The other thing that I've kind of done over the years is there's a number of people that I've observed or tried to observe and learn from who I felt had qualities that I would like to have. You know, they were successful in a number of different ways. And I thought, well, you know, if I can observe these people, what is it that draws me to these people? Why do I want to follow them? You know, why do I want to do that? And so that's my other list that I update periodically. And I will tell you, these are all stolen and ripped off. You know, I mean, I have shamelessly stolen these from numbers of people. And one of them's here, Jeff Grubb. You can buy his tape. It's discounted, but you can buy his tape. And Jeff is a part of a group that we meet monthly, and it's a bunch of business leaders here in town. And the group is outstanding. There are so many people to learn from in that group. But anyway, I have shamelessly stolen these ideas from various people. The first one is, these what I would say are traits of people that I have enjoyed following. So traits of leaders, maybe, something like that. A strong moral compass, and I define that as knowing right from wrong. Now, a strong moral compass is something that we try and ingrain in our kids. We want to constantly have as a part of our makeup. Its close cousin is the second one, is honesty. You know, and we've all learned that lesson. You cannot outrun the truth. And it's important. Most of the people that I am attracted to are honest people. A bias towards action and not analysis. And there just seems to be people that pretty soon it just comes out, let's get it done. You know, and you've all been in meetings, you've all been in organizations where analysis paralysis, whatever you want to call it, and the end of the meeting is scheduling another meeting. It absolutely drives me wacko. You know, I just think, oh, you know, first of all, who has time for another meeting? But then you can never get everybody together, and then there's usually not, that lets the first meeting end without any agreement. Because the agreement is, let's have another meeting. You know, just, anyway, bias towards action, not analysis. You can tell there's certain pet peeves that come out in my speech here. The fourth one is good communication skills. You know, written, spoken, personal, you know, that type of thing. It seems like the people that I'm drawn to enjoy communicating. You know, it's not a hassle for them. Now, in the day of electronic communication, it's becoming more of a hassle. I mean, you know, I never thought I would dream for the stack of pink slips again. But you know, with email and voicemail and everything else, I'm ready to go back to the pink slips. You know, the pink slips I could handle. You know, they weren't overwhelming. You measured them and you didn't count them. That stinking counter in Outlook, you know, 62 new ones. You know, you just, oh man, you know, 62. And if you're like me, 60 of them, you really don't need. You know, I mean, 60 of those pink slips would have been, you know, history. The fifth one is a competitive spirit. This is something that I've learned to look for when we hire people, a competitive spirit. And I define a competitive spirit as someone who never gives up, not I got to win at all costs. The I got to win at all costs thing is not a good behavior trait. The, you know, just win baby, Al Davis down in Oakland, that type of thing. That's not what I'm talking about when I say competitive spirit. I'm talking about people who just simply won't give up. And you've all experienced that when you hang in there for that last moment is often when good things happen. So I think a competitive spirit is important. I think it's important to enjoy problem solving. You know, I've found that really is what my job's all about, is problem solving. You have to really like working puzzles. You know, I mean, that's really what it's about, is everything that seems to migrate into my office is a puzzle. And some of them are kind of easy and some of them are Rubik's Cubes. And, but I think enjoying problem solving is one of them. A history of consistency. And I've learned that the hard way is no surprises is really what that means. Nobody enjoys surprises. You know, my kids don't enjoy surprises, you know. I surprised one kid just the other night when the cell phone bill came and the family plan's there, and she's over on the text messaging thing. And you know, so it's her money. I mean, we've already got that grounded out, so it's not like it's any skin out of my game. But I said, you know, I just said, okay, that's it. No more text messaging. You know, we're going to cut off the text messaging. Well, that was a surprise to her. You can imagine her reaction. You know, oh, jeez. I mean, you know, to me, cutting off text messaging was no big deal. I don't have text messaging on my phone. To her, it was, you know, all civilization just halted. And so, and I didn't react probably the right way. You know, I said, hey, you're over, that's it. You know, and I was holding firm, and my wife's over there, you know, signaling me, you know. And yeah, so now I'm in the spot where I got to go back, and I got to back up off the surprise and say, okay, you know, we got to manage the text messaging. There's another 2 months probation here type thing or whatever before. So anyway, that's, you know, that's problem solving and consistency. No surprises, even with the kids. The next one is these people tend to be creative. You know, I really didn't have much. What do I want to say? I didn't give creative people much credit when I came out of college. I thought, well, you know, if you can't, you know, I mean, if you don't know what a balance sheet is, how can you be productive in life? You know, and so, but I've learned that. First of all, creative people really, they're the most difficult people to manage, but they really are the ones who add value the quickest to your effort, and that's how you solve new problems. New problems are only solved with creative solutions. Old problems can be revisited, studied, looked up, you know, history as a teacher and that type of thing, but creativity really is the key to problem solving. The people that I like to kind of hang around with have a passion for what they do. You know, for whatever reason, maybe it's genetic. I like the food business, you know, and I talk with people all the time about it, and it is a very simple business, but it moves at a really high rate of speed. I mean, the types of volumes and transactions and things that go on in our industry inventory, some inventory in some of these warehouses is turning 60 and 65 times a year. I mean, you think of that's fast-moving stuff. And I'm passionate about the food business, and you know, it's such a simple industry. It strikes people as funny. They say, "Oh, geez, you know, how can you be passionate about peas, beans, and corn?" You know, and you say, "Well, you know, I don't know how it happened, but I am." So, anyway, I think passion. You know, the passion people, they aren't just checking in and checking out. And then the last thing I put down is they enjoy seeing others succeed. And there was a great little article about Jack Welch appeared at Stanford and talked to the MBAs, and it was written up in the little Stanford magazine this last month. And the dean wrote the article, and he said, "You know, I finally figured out that when I got," this is Jack Welch speaking, that when I got to managing people, it was about them and not about I. It was really about them, not about I. And what he's really saying there is he figured out that it's watching other people succeed is really what leadership's all about. And then good things will happen to your career if you can get those people thinking that way. So those are the two lists. It's good to, but it's better than, and then these kind of traits or I don't know what you would really call them, but of people that I've observed over my career and what is kind of unique or different about them that I would like to include in my life. And then you say, well, how do you pick those things up and everything else? I think that's the hardest part is working on these issues and trying to develop them. And where do you get experience? You know, it's the old, well, you got to have a job to get a job, and where do you get the experience and things like that. Well, I'll go back to what I said first, is that leadership's required everywhere. You know, you don't have to be promoted to be a leader. You know, there's leadership opportunities at home. There's leadership opportunities in your extended family. There's leadership opportunities in the community. There's just tons of nonprofit organizations that need help and direction and leadership. Your church is a great organization. You can become a leader. There's just schools. I mean, there are so many opportunities to learn and experience and suck in your leadership. I think that it goes without saying that you have to then kind of assess yourself. And that's one of the things that I love about this group that Jeff and I are part of is we're honest with each other about, well, you know, blind spots, and we talk about important topics in leadership and that type of thing, how faith works into that. You know, personally to me, faith is a big part of my bedrock. I did not grow up a churched guy, but I grew up with a really churched grandma. And somehow or another, it switched generations. You know, it hopped over my mom and dad somehow. And, but, you know, my faith is a piece of that experience where I can learn leadership skills. And that's from things that I have in common with other people of faith. That's also things that are in the Bible and other books of faith. But that's, I think, an important part of how I keep doing this personal assessment. But I think then you can also, there's other spots to assess yourself. You know, there's a tremendous, you know, there's volumes and volumes. You can just go up to Borders and there's volumes on leadership. And, you know, you can read about leadership, you can experience it, you can talk to other people about it. But I think that if you really aspire to kind of be the one who is setting the pace, setting the direction, you know, taking responsibility, then do a little assessment. Ask somebody who you admire as a leader to say, hey, be honest with me. Where are these areas? What about some of these traits? What about that type of thing? What can I do to take a little more direction or a little more of the pace, a little more of setting the example? And so I would just suggest to you that, you know, if you aspire to be in those types of positions where the responsibility is kind of yours rather than somebody else's, then do that assessment and you know, ask people, you know, what's going on here? What can I do to improve? You know, what makes you different from me? What makes that person different from that manager? You know, those types of things, and actually just, you know, have a conversation with yourself. So again, you know, all progress I think requires leadership. And someone's going to be setting the pace, the direction, the example, and taking the responsibility. And I would suggest that there isn't anybody here who can't do that job as well as the person who is. So I just encourage you to step out and step up. You know, mistakes happen. That's all part of learning, and that's part of leadership as well. But I would suggest to you that that's something that you should look at. And I appreciate your give me the opportunity to share with you, and I'm happy to take any questions, or I'll be here afterwards, happy to hand out my card or my email or anything like that. So again, thanks for having me, and good luck with your self-assessments.
We will not use the microphone.
We do have a few minutes for questions.
Yes, we do have a few minutes for questions. Thank you. Any questions?
Sure.
You said your faith is a big part of the kind of foundation of your leadership, but and you gave one example, like honesty and integrity. But what are the other kind of more concrete pieces of your leadership style that are a function of your faith?
A function of faith? Oh, that's a good question. Everybody hear it? Okay. I think if you get back to the right from wrong thing, I think there's tremendous examples in the Bible about right from wrong. I mean, and not just the Ten Commandments, but the Old Testament is just full of, all sorts of right from wrong things. I think there's good examples of different examples of leadership experiences in the Bible as well. So, Bible study and just Bible reading and Bible interest, I guess, is probably a better way of looking at it, is a part of that foundation. I think it's interesting to read the Old Testament and read about, Moses and David and Daniel and some of these people. I mean, I'm thinking lose-lose situations, 10,000 or hack off a customer. And you read through there and you think, whoa, these guys really had major problems. I mean, every time I think I got it bad, all I have to do is open my Bible to Job. I don't even have to read, because I'm afraid to read, because I know what Job was facing. I think, oh man, I got it easy. So I'd say that's part of how faith integrates. I'm fortunate. I think that your faith always has a way of refocusing specific business problems as maybe not that big a deal. I'm lucky I have a board that I report to that treats me very fairly. They've allowed me to make mistakes. When I took over the job I have now, I was not near as gray. I was younger, and I think they knew that I would make mistakes, and yet they hung in there with me. So I think that's a part of the compassion issue, that if you're expressing compassion and passion for your job, then you're going to get it back from your bosses, and that's been my experience with the board that I work for. Faith works into my marriage. Having a stable marriage has helped me be a better businessman, a better parent probably. You'd have to ask my girls that one. Wait until we get the cell phone thing figured out, and then ask. Yeah. But no, I think those are, there's lots of areas of faith that fit in with those lists that I went through. Those are the ones that come to mind quickest.
We probably have time for one more question. Matt?
Sure.
Working with a lot of dynamic people, what is, in your opinion, the best way to support your leaders?
Okay, the question was, you work with a lot of dynamic people, what is the best way to support your leaders?
We've got an interesting group of folks that I work with, and they are not at all alike, many of them. Some of the things we do quality control work on products, so we have food scientists that work at Western Family. We do label design, so we have creative and graphic artists. We buy and sell a lot of fresh meat, and if you've ever dealt in the meat business, they call them meatheads, but the meat people are very different. I think that, that's another one of those that take an hour. But I think the best thing you can do is try and relate with where their circumstances are and cut people some slack. I don't cut them slack on being prepared and on being informed, but I do cut them slack on if things don't go right. I haven't met anybody at Western Family, at least, who intended to make the mistake. Most of these people are very well intentioned and they're working hard, but often things don't work out. And I think if you're talking about supporting other leaders in our company, then I got to hold them accountable for being prepared and for being intentional and for being ready. But we have long discussions about mistakes, but if we learn from them, then we'll have a stronger organization. I think that if you cut people slack, then they're going to be much more productive for you. And supporting them by cutting them slack, I think, is the first thing that I would come up with.
Great. Thank you, Ron.
Yeah, you bet.